We're almost done, believe it or not. It's almost finished. I told you at the beginning, or I think I did, that I would drop you off at the doorstep of modernity. So we wouldn't be talking about, the 21st century or anything like that. Right now, we're in the 19th century, the Victorian era. And in the last installment, we did the Victorian literature of Victorian England itself. And today we're going to do the Victorian era England, the 19th century uh, uh, fiction of America. And of course, it like with the England installment, it teems with possibilities, teems with them. So I want to stress again a couple of things. I want to stress one: this is a bare bones thing. This is benchmark essentials just to get your foot in the door. And two, the reason for that is to convince you, to show you that this is meant to be accessible. These are things that you don't have to put off reading, and that you will enjoy and find fascinating, uh, so that you can work on them for the rest of your life, and you can also add to them for the rest of your life. We're talking about the 16th century, and we're talking about four authors. It could be 40 authors, and when you're talking about once general literacy and the printing process exploded, so did the number of authors who were worth reading. So the 19th century, to put it mildly, we're scratching the surface here. But for the American side of 19th century fiction, we're going to deal with three books, just three, which is painful to me because I love the whole world of it, and I'm leaving out just in terms of American classics. I'm leaving out Walden Pond. I'm leaving out Leaves of Grass. I'm leaving out major stuff just to pare it down and get your foot in the door. So we're talking about three novels here. The first one is Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harriet Beecher Stowe, which was famously quipped by President Lincoln. So you're the little lady who started this big war, in the sense that her book humanizes and dramatizes the evils of slavery. But and that's the thumbnail for it, which often obscures the fact that it's also a heck of a book. It's genuinely gripping and touching and heartbreaking, and you got to read it. When it comes to American literature of the 19th century, it's a book you have to read, and because because of the racial miasma of the 19th century that obviously continues in the 20th century and is obviously very much with us in the 21st century. It reminds me of something that an old literary friend of mine used to say over and over again. When the subject of America would come up, or the subject of American literature would come up, he would say, "American literature is about race, period." I always thought he was being superficial, but our next book is also in very large part about race, and that's of course Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. Necessary reading. It doesn't take long, and there are large parts of it that are enjoyable, and also large parts of it that are very thought provoking. So, Uncle Tom's Cabin and Huckleberry Finn are the first two, and then and then there's the third one. If you listen carefully, you can hear it surfacing. Yes, I'm afraid. It's Moby Dick by Herman Melville. uh, uh, it's my firm belief that every century in America produces at least one, usually only one book that is monstrously brilliant and unclassifiable. And it's my contention that 19th century America actually produced two such books, one being Leaves of Grass and the other being Moby Dick. We're leaving out Leaves of Grass, we're leaving out poetry and nonfiction for now, but that still leaves us with Herman Melville's tale of the obsessed Captain Ahab and the white whale that he chases, and everybody knows the story, but the book is bottomless. It's incredible, and so you have to read it, and it can't be an abridged version or an illustrated version, even though there are very good abridged and very good illustrated versions of it. And when I advocate that you read an unabridged version of Moby Dick, that's going to bring you slam up against the obstacle that most people have when they try to read the unabridged Moby Dick. And if you've dipped your toe into the book, you'll know what I mean. It's the whaling chapters. You might think, well, isn't the whole book about whaling? But there are cetology chapters. There are chapters that are simple exposition on Melville's part, where he talks about whales. And he doesn't advance the plot at all. Doesn't talk about any of his characters. Or he talks about whaling. Or he talks about equipment. And I've had so many first-time Melville readers, first-time Moby Dick readers, hit those chapters and think, what on earth? It was just getting good. We were getting story and character and conflict, and now I'm supposed to read about finback whales for 10 pages. And the point I want to make, I've taught this in classes, and I've made this point endlessly. Melville makes a point. When he's talking about the ship off at sea, when his ship with Ishmael on board and Queequeg and the whole crew, when a whaling vessel leaves port, it leaves with everything it needs to be gone for years. And they do that by storing up everything. They store up all of their try-works so that the ship doesn't need anything except what it gets from its stores and the whales. And what Melville was very consciously trying to do, he was writing about a dying industry, an industry that that a certain fugitive part of his soul hoped would die. And he was right, it did die. So, but he was writing for you. He was writing for 100, 200, 500 years later. He was pouring the greatest refinement of his genius into this book. But a part of him knew perfectly well that he couldn't rely on you knowing anything about whaling by the time you read the book. So he included in the book its own try-works. He included its own casts of salted meat and water. He included all the stuff about whales and whaling that you need to know in order to understand the stuff that isn't about whales and whaling. So my contention here, my urging for you is to read it all, read the whole thing, and absorb the whole world of American 19th century industrial whaling that otherwise you wouldn't absorb. You would know you don't have any contact with it whatsoever. That's my advice to you for Moby Dick. So that is the end of our 19th century section of the Western Canon Starter Kit. We have Uncle Tom's Cabin by Harry Beecher Stowe. We have The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain. And we have Moby Dick by Herman Melville. And that winds up the 19th century and brings us right on to the... What was that I hear? Here, let me start over again. That winds up the 19th century of fiction and brings us right on to the... Oh, there it is again. There it is again. It sounds like the high-pitched scream of a million readers all over the world. What is it that they're saying? Have I neglected someone? Yes, I have. I have neglected someone. It was intentional. It was meant to be the final word on the 19th century because the person I've neglected is the only person in the entire Western Canon Starter Kit where I'm going to say not that you have to read one of their books, and not in a rare instance that you have to read two of their books, but that you have to read all of their books. You have to read the entire novels of Jane Austen. No ifs, ands, or buts. No squirming. No complaining. No saying, oh, well, I like Emma, but I really don't like Pride and Prejudice. No saying, oh, well, I like Pride and Prejudice, but I really don't like Sense and Sensibility. No. In terms of shadow, in terms of effect, in terms of what every single author after her had read, whether they admitted it or not, you got to read Jane Austen. You're going to love it, but you have to do it. There is absolutely no way to say in a starter kit like this, well, Pride and Prejudice, but not Northanger Abbey. No. All right, so you've got the British Victorian era, and then you have America, and then you have Jane Austen. Not only read her, but know her, and become a worshiper of hers. And that really does end the 19th century for the Western Canon starter kit. So look how far we've come. It hasn't been that long. I've just taken too much time to do this. So next, we move on to the 20th century, but don't get comfortable because we're not going far and we're not staying long. The Western Canon starter kit is almost over. I want this to be short. I want it to be for you to be able to look at it and say, I can do that. It might take some time, but it won't take forever. So that's where we're going to end for now. We'll be back with the 20th century. And then we'll wrap things up. Thank you, BookTube.